husband and I started to have marriage troubles. Got on the verge of divorce, but worked ourselves on top again, only to find out that he transferred his properties and savings to his ex-girlfriend, just to be safe. Now he's lost everything because she ended up fleeing, and I'm divorcing him anyways. I used to believe that every marriage went through its rough patches. It was normal to hit a wall, lose each other for a while, and then slowly find your way back. I clung to that belief so tightly I almost choked on it. My husband and I had been married for 8 years when things started to fall apart. No big affair, no screaming matches, just distance. The kind that starts with small silences and gradually grows into entire days where you barely speak. We became strangers who happened to live in the same house. I was working long hours trying to secure a promotion that I'd been chasing for nearly 2 years. He was in between projects and mostly stayed home, which I didn't think much of at the time. I figured it was temporary. He said he was reevaluating his priorities, but I didn't realize that reevaluation didn't include me. The fights started small, over laundry, bills, who left the kitchen light on. Then they got meaner, personal. He'd say I was obsessed with work. I'd ask him when he last updated his resume. Eventually, we hit that inevitable question: is this even working anymore? We started talking about separation. I even looked up apartments. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the night we sat on the couch, both too emotionally drained to argue, and just talked like humans again. Or maybe it was the way he held my hand during my mother's health scare, even though we hadn't held hands in months. Whatever it was, we agreed to try again, one last time. We set boundaries, signed up for counseling, started going for walks after dinner, made intentional time for each other. And it actually started working. Slowly but surely, we were laughing together, touched again. I let myself believe we were healing. He even brought up finances and long-term plans, said he wanted to protect what we were rebuilding. He didn't go into much detail. I didn't push. I was so desperate to believe he was putting in the work that I ignored the red flags. The vague comments, the paperwork he suddenly got interested in reviewing on his own. I'd always handled most of our financial stuff, joint accounts, insurance, tax prep. But now he said he was just taking some responsibility off my plate. I thought that meant growth, maturity, partnership. Turns out it meant secrets. But at the time, I was still hopeful. Still thinking about booking a weekend getaway to celebrate our progress. I told a few close friends that I finally felt like we were coming out the other side of something hard. They were happy for me. So was I. We even hosted a small dinner at our place. Just the two of us and some friends. I caught myself smiling at him across the table and thinking, we made it. Not many couples survive the kind of apathy we had fallen into. But we were trying. I was proud of that. So when he started talking about making some minor adjustments to his financial accounts, I barely blinked. He said it was to keep things cleaner and separate, in case anything ever happened. I asked him what that meant, and he shrugged, said it was just a protective measure for both of us. I took him at his word, because what kind of person would do all that? Counseling, healing, repairing, only to be scheming behind my back. The kind of person who doesn't understand what commitment really means, apparently. Still, at that point, I didn't know, not yet. All I knew was we were on the mend. The foundation wasn't perfect, but we were laying new bricks. And after so many months of cold shoulders and avoidance, that alone felt like a miracle. I started sleeping better, eating better, smiling without forcing it. I even had a few nights where I didn't feel the need to check his phone while he was in the shower. The trust wasn't completely rebuilt, but it was under construction. He started complimenting me again, asked about my day, sat beside me instead of across from me at restaurants. It's funny how, when you've been through a quiet war, the smallest gestures can feel like peace treaties. I was beginning to picture us 5 years from now, maybe in a new house, maybe with a dog, traveling again the way we used to before life got in the way. I let myself imagine growing old with him, even after everything, even after we had come so close to walking away. I thought we were turning a corner. I thought we were safe. And he let me believe that. He let me believe that even as he was transferring all his assets to someone else behind my back. But that's the thing about people who don't trust you. They assume you'll do the same, and instead of asking for reassurance, they start building their own exit strategy. I had no idea then what was coming, but it was already in motion. Update 1. For a little while, I convinced myself that everything was finally okay. I clung to that fantasy like it was a life raft. And to be fair, it wasn't all pretend. We were doing better, or at least acting like it. We had gotten through our rough patch after all. Every relationship had its dips, right? We just happened to nosedive a little harder than most. Still, we were slowly climbing back up, or so I thought. It was around this time that my husband got very financially curious. That's probably the best way to put it. Curious. But in a way that felt new. He started asking questions like whether our joint account was secure enough, or whether it made sense for us to have redundant property paperwork. He said it in that overly casual tone people use when they don't want you to ask too many follow-ups. He'd mutter things like how nowadays people lose everything in a divorce, even when they're the ones trying to save the marriage. I remember laughing it off, joking that we'd already done our worst and made it through. I didn't realize he wasn't joking back. I chalked it up to paranoia. He had a slightly cynical streak when it came to money. That wasn't new, but I also figured maybe our rough patch had scared him more than he let on. Maybe this was his way of trying to feel secure by taking control of the finances while we rebuilt emotionally. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. That benefit would cost more than I ever imagined. One afternoon, while sorting through some papers in his office, I noticed that his name was no longer listed on the title of our second property. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe some weird bureaucratic quirk or a refinancing error, but when I asked him about it, he waved it off. Said he was restructuring a few things to be more tax efficient. He had bought it with his money after our marriage, and he did not want to put my name on there, so I was confused. I didn't push too hard. That was the second time I ignored a knot in my stomach in favor of preserving the peace. The third came a few weeks later when I walked past his laptop and saw an email thread with a woman whose name I hadn't heard in a long time, his ex-girlfriend, the one he always referred to as a mistake from his early 20s, the one who, according to him, was all kinds of drama and chaos wrapped in a pretty face, the one he once said made him grateful for a quiet life with me. At first, I didn't jump to conclusions. I wasn't proud of it, but I checked the thread, scrolled through. Nothing overtly romantic, at least not in the emails I saw. But the language was way too familiar for someone who was supposed to be ancient history. He was asking her for advice, financial advice, talking about setting things up in a way that would protect him if things didn't work out again. That phrase hit me like a slap. Again. We just come back from the edge. We were supposed to be healing, and here he was entertaining conversations with a woman he used to love about how to secure his future in case I left. Or worse, in case he did. I confronted him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked why he was talking to her. He looked startled for a second, but then put on that patronizing half smile I'd grown to hate during our worst fights. He said he was only talking to her because she knew a guy who helped set up private financial trusts, that she'd offered to connect him with someone discreet and smart. He made it sound like it was all business. And maybe, in a twisted way, it was. I asked him why he didn't tell me. He said he didn't want to stress me out, that we were finally getting back on track. He didn't want money talk to derail our progress. That sentence sounded innocent until you peel back the layers. He didn't want money talk to derail the progress he was pretending we were making. He kept talking like it was some big, responsible gesture, like he was doing this for us. I couldn't understand why I felt more suspicious than reassured. So I told him straight up I wanted full transparency. Anything involving our property, our accounts, our long-term assets, I needed to know about it. No more side conversations, no more mysterious restructuring. He nodded, agreed, said, "Of course, no problem." But I saw the flicker of hesitation in his face. I didn't realize it then, but I had already lost him. Not to love, not to temptation, not even to betrayal in the traditional sense. I lost him to fear, to the belief that I might hurt him someday and he needed to beat me to the punch. He never stopped to consider that in trying to protect himself from me, he was actively destroying the very thing we were trying to save. We stopped talking about the future after that. We still had dinners, we still had movie nights, he still kissed me goodnight in the mornings, but there was that distance again, a coldness that wasn't there during our rough patch, but one that was far more permanent, like something had calcified between us. The trust, once cracked, had been filled with wax, temporary, fragile, and he knew it. Because by then his escape plan had already been wired, signed, and delivered. I just hadn't figured it out yet. Update 2. The breaking point wasn't some loud confrontation, didn't come crashing down with screaming or slamming doors. No, it unraveled in silence, just like every other betrayal that isn't meant to be discovered. It just happened. I had taken the afternoon off to prep for a meeting I was hosting from home. My husband was out, supposedly running errands, and I went looking through our drawer for one of the old USB drives we used to back up documents with. You know the kind, half-forgotten tech from before cloud storage made everything easier. He'd always insisted on backing things up manually, said it was safer. I found the drive, and I wish I hadn't. The documents on it weren't hidden, they were just unlabeled. But I recognized the file names. I opened one titled Transfer Instructions. My heart didn't even race at first. I was expecting some old tax form or scanned ID. Instead, I found a signed transfer of ownership, his name, legally giving up claim to one of our properties, not to a family member, not to a trust, to her, the ex-girlfriend. My stomach sank. I opened the next file, bank transfer confirmations, one after another, tens of thousands, then hundreds, slowly drained over months from accounts I never even knew he still had open. Accounts in his name only. But they weren't just emptied, they were moved. All of it gone. And it was her name on everything, at the bottom of every legal document. It was like a knife twisting deeper every time I saw it. This wasn't him protecting anything. This wasn't a precaution. This was preparation. He had slowly and meticulously offloaded nearly all of his personal assets to his ex. His reasoning? I didn't know yet. But I didn't need a lawyer to tell me what it looked like. He'd done it while we were supposedly working on our marriage, while we were going to therapy, while he was bringing me breakfast in bed and calling me his rock. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. The silence was so loud I could hear my own heartbeat. When he came home, I didn't explode. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask him why. I just held up the USB and told him to sit down. He tried to play dumb at first, said he didn't know what I meant, Then, when I said her name, his entire face shifted, panic, guilt, followed by that same damn rehearsed calmness he used during our worst fights. He said it was just in case. Those were his actual words, just in case. I asked him if he understood what that sounded like. He said he wasn't trying to hurt me, he was just scared. Said he'd already lost control once when we were on the verge of divorce. He didn't want to end up destroyed if it happened again. I stared at him, barely breathing, as he tried to explain how transferring all of his assets to another woman, his ex of all people, was somehow an act of self-preservation. He swore there was no romantic involvement, that it was strictly strategic, that she had legal knowledge, connections, and some friend who worked in asset protection. I asked why not a lawyer, a real certified lawyer, why her? He didn't answer. I asked if she ever manipulated him into this, if she had some hold over him, if maybe he was being blackmailed. He said no. He said it was his idea. And that's when something inside me broke completely, because it would have almost been easier to forgive him if he'd been conned. If she had played him, sweet-talked him, threatened him, but she didn't. He trusted her more than he trusted me. He handed her everything while pretending to work on our marriage. And he had the nerve to think I'd understand. I told him I was done. He started backpedaling instantly, saying he could get it all back, that nothing was permanent, that she was just holding it temporarily like a safe deposit box, that it was all reversible. I told him I didn't care. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about her. It was the fact that when things got hard, again, his first instinct wasn't to protect us, it was to protect himself. He didn't fight for our marriage. He secured the escape route and locked the door behind him. I left that night. And then came the cherry on top. 2 days later, he called me in a panic. She was gone. Not just not responding gone. I mean gone. Disconnected phone, social media nuked, apartment cleaned out, no sign of her, no way to reach her, and every penny he had, just in case, was now part of her future, not his. I listened while he tried to form words. I said I was sorry for him, for his choices, but not for myself, because I wasn't staying. He told me I was throwing everything away over a misunderstanding. I told him that's exactly what he did. Update 3. After I ended the call, I sat in my car and just stared at the steering wheel. He was almost broke. He was blindsided. He was panicking, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger, no sadness, just a strange, steady calm. Like all the air had finally cleared, and I could finally see just how far I'd stretched myself trying to save something he had already abandoned. He wasn't crying because he missed me. He wasn't devastated about the marriage. He was upset because the plan he had made without me behind my back had collapsed. Because the person he trusted more than his own wife walked away with everything he thought he was protecting. And somehow, he still expected me to help him pick up the pieces. He sent a few more messages after that. Some long, rambling apologies, some weirdly poetic. One that blamed his ex for manipulating him and promised he'd never speak to her again. I didn't bother replying. I forwarded them all to my lawyer. Even if he never spoke to her again, it didn't matter. She had already taken everything from him. I'm sure she didn't care if he spoke to her or not. At that point, I had already filed the divorce papers. There was no saving this. Not when he'd spent our second chance preparing for our downfall. A few of our mutual friends reached out, confused. Apparently, he'd been telling people we were working through some financial misunderstandings and taking space, which made me laugh out loud because sure, if that's what we're calling it now. Financial misunderstandings, like accidentally transferring hundreds of thousands in assets to your ex-girlfriend during marriage counseling, is just a clerical error. I corrected the narrative quickly. No drama, no oversharing, just facts. I told them he transferred nearly everything he owned to his ex while we were trying to repair our marriage, and now she'd ghosted him and left him with nothing. that I was filing for divorce because there was nothing left to trust and no intention left to salvage. Most people were stunned into silence. A few awkwardly said they hoped we could work it out. I didn't dignify that with a response. I started packing my things from our shared house with the precision of someone finally freed from purgatory. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't emotional. I was methodical. I packed the essentials, left behind the shared furniture, and made sure to take every document that had my name on it. Because I'd learned the hard way that blind trust costs. He showed up once while I was there. He looked terrible, gaunt, unshaven, like he hadn't slept in days. He asked if we could talk. I told him to make it short. He said he never thought she'd disappear, that he really believed she'd hold the assets until he asked for them back, that he thought I'd come around eventually and we'd be okay, and then he'd bring everything home. Home. Like our marriage was a storage unit he could visit when it suited him. I told him I was done trying to make sense of someone who made decisions based on fear and selfishness, that love doesn't mean much when your first instinct is to prepare for abandonment, that no matter how bad things got, I had never looked for an escape hatch. He stood there defeated and said he didn't think I'd actually go through with the divorce. I said maybe if he'd put half the effort into saving our marriage as he did preparing for its end, we wouldn't be here. Then I left. Clean, quiet. Update 4. Over the next few months, the paperwork moved fast since the majority of the assets had already been transferred to someone else. There wasn't much to fight over, which in a twisted way worked in my favor. No drawn out court battles, no property disputes, just a clean break because he made sure to leave nothing behind. It was poetic, really. He safeguarded himself so well against the idea of losing everything to me in a divorce that he handed it all away to someone else first. And now, as we stood in front of the judge signing our final documents, he had the audacity to look like the one who'd been betrayed. After the hearing, he asked me to lunch. I almost laughed. He said he wanted to apologize again, that he couldn't live with how this ended, that he'd made a mistake and he didn't realize how big it was until it was too late. I told him I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his regret, and I didn't need anything from him anymore. That's what made this whole thing bearable now. I was free. He said he hoped I'd be willing to give it time, that maybe we'd reconnect when the dust settled. I looked him in the eye and said, "There's no dust. There's no later. And there's certainly no we." Funny how people don't take you seriously until you take everything away. Your time, your energy, your silence, your patience. Now he gets it. Now he's the one with nothing left to protect. And me? I'm fine. Not amazing, not glowing, just fine. And that's a gift in itself. Update 5. It's been almost a year now, a year since I walked out of that courtroom with my name, my peace, and my future completely intact. I wish I could say I felt triumphant or that I took some sort of vindictive pleasure in seeing him face the consequences, but honestly, all I felt is stillness. Not the heavy, crushing silence I used to feel when I lay next to someone I couldn't trust, but the kind that comes when your life is no longer revolving around damage control, when your name isn't tied to someone else's chaos. He lost everything, and not just the physical stuff, the properties, the savings, the carefully staged retirement plans he thought he was masterminding behind my back. He lost his job too, though I had nothing to do with that. Apparently word got around his company had been considering him for a higher executive role, but when the internal audit revealed some odd personal financial behavior, the offer vanished. No official scandal, no headlines, just quiet distancing. The kind that happens when people start seeing you as a liability. How do I know this? I have a friend there, someone in the upper management. And him, he tried reaching out a few times, mostly through long-winded messages, full of regret and clumsy attempts at nostalgia. He wrote about our first vacation, our wedding playlist, The night we stayed up till 4 a.m. putting together furniture and drinking cheap wine because we couldn't afford a real bed frame back then. But he never mentioned the betrayal. Not really, not directly. Not the woman he gave everything to, or the way he decided without telling me that protecting himself meant erasing my place in our future. So I never responded. A few people had asked me if I walked away with anything, considering how much he'd given away, and the answer? More than I expected. See, I've been smart. Years ago, when I first started freelancing and slowly built my legal practice from the ground up, I kept my income separate. Not out of suspicion, but out of caution. He had asked me to use my income for all the household expenses, bills, groceries, while his income would go into investments for us. I'd seen too many women fold their lives into a single shared account, only to be left with nothing when things went sideways. So I declined and kept a private fund, a mix of investments, savings, and emergency money. I'd also purchased a small apartment in my name, alone, right before we got married. He always teased me about how I wanted a backup plan. Turns out I had one. Not because I expected betrayal, but because I refused to be blindsided by it. That apartment became my sanctuary after everything blew up. I renovated it slowly over the last year. Yes, he had tried to ask for money in the divorce settlement, but I shot it down and told him I would come after the house we lived in and not split it if he tried anything shady. I also took some time off from major cases. I focused more on consultation work, picking and choosing clients carefully. My financial footing was steady, thanks to the assets I'd built on my own. No trust fund, no inheritance, just smart decisions and the kind of discipline that gets mocked until it saves you. One of my friends joked that I should write a book. Call it How to Divorce a Man Who Gave Everything to His Ex and Expected You to Wait It Out. I laughed, but honestly, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Because if I learned anything from all this, it's that emotional betrayal is sneaky. It doesn't always show up with lipstick stains and lies. Sometimes it wears the face of practicality, of being smart or just in case. He thought love was something you locked away until the storm passed, that if he made it through, he could just unlock it again and expect everything to be right where he left it. But love doesn't survive in vaults. Trust doesn't regenerate like hair. And marriage isn't a fire drill. You don't get to practice running away and then return to the scene like nothing happened. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he tried tracking down his ex, the one who ran off with his entire safety net. Apparently she ghosted not just him, but everyone. Switched states, maybe even countries. Some people think she planned it all from the beginning. Others say she got fed up waiting for him to leave me for her and decided to take her own kind of payment. I didn't care what the truth is, because while he was trying to buy peace of mind, I was doing the hard work of actually earning it. Now he's stuck, alone, trying to repair his image and justify what he did to the few people who still answer his calls. His family's divided. Some of them think I abandoned him during a low point. Others quietly reached out and said they respected how I handled it. One of his cousins even asked me to help review a prenup for her upcoming marriage. I did it, no charge, because I'm fine. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to tell my side louder. I don't even need him to admit what he did wrong. My peace isn't conditional anymore. It lives in the fact that I trusted myself when everything screamed at me to wait. That I chose to walk away instead of clinging to a version of love that required me to pretend nothing had happened. I still see couples at cafes holding hands, laughing, and no, I don't get bitter. I don't flinch at weddings or feel awkward during love stories. What happened to me wasn't proof that love fails. It was proof that it requires courage, honesty, and mutual risk. He wasn't willing to risk anything for us. He gambled everything on her, thinking love could be outsourced to safety. And now he's calling a disconnected number and wondering why no one's answering. Edit. Also, last I heard, she may have moved countries. I don't know if there's any way for him to get his assets back. The only way I can think of is to hire a private investigator, and then maybe they could compromise. He had texted me that he had contacted her ex. Maybe they planned to do something together. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.